Hey there, Alex Kidman here today, taking a look at the brand new Google Pixel 7a. Now, Google's Pixel A series are their value phones, so they're their mid-range, lower-cost phones, usually a fair slice down from where their flagship phones, which right now are the Pixel 7 and Pixel 7 Pro, sit. Only, that's not what Google's done with this particular phone, and I'll get into that in a minute. But first, like every other YouTuber out there, I've got to thank you if you've just recently subscribed to the channel, and if you haven't, I've got to encourage you to hit that subscribe button because it helps me do everything that I do. And now, back to the Pixel 7a. So as I said, this is actually doing more than it should, and I'm genuinely really impressed by it. I kind of thought, coming into it, oh yeah, just another spec bump, just another kind of reasonable mid-range Google phone, but actually it's quite a bit more. Let me explain what I mean by that. So in design terms, there's not a huge amount going on that wasn't really going on with the Pixel 6a, really. You've got this new sky color, which is bluish. I quite like a blue phone, of course. I'm quite notable for it. But you've also got charcoal and snow if you prefer those colors as well. It's quite nice. It's quite well built. A 6.1-inch phone, which sits quite nicely in the hand. So if you like that smaller phone feel, this is going to be quite good for you. And of course, there just aren't that many powerful Android phones out there with smaller frames. So it's good to see a bit more competition here. Still, that could all just describe mostly the Pixel 6a. And where this steps up is by the inclusion of a 90Hz display. Now, you can get faster, even cheaper than this, you can get faster. But 90Hz is that nice little bump up. And critically speaking, it basically means that this matches what the Pixel 7 does, only for a couple of $100 less. And that's really kind of compelling, because certainly with the 6 to the 6a, there were definite compromises made to make the 6a the cheap one. Google really hasn't done that this time around with the screen, but it's not just the screen, because I also want to address the camera. So look, the budget version of most phones tends to keep their prices low and differentiation high, most notably when it comes to the camera. And look, let's give that a little context. The Pixel 6a, which is what this is replacing, features dual 12-megapixel wide and ultra-wide sensors and an 8-megapixel front-facing camera. And the Pixel 7, which sits above this phone theoretically in Google's structures, has a 50-megapixel wide and 12-megapixel ultra-wide at the rear with a 10.8-megapixel selfie camera. So you might expect that the 7a would have something slightly less than the Pixel 7, maybe something slightly more than the Pixel 6a. But that's not what Google did at all. Instead, you get a primary 64-megapixel wide sensor, 13-megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and a 13-megapixel selfie camera to play with. All of those are a step up from the more expensive Pixel 7, and it's a really bold and interesting move from Google. Because look, yes, we can expect the Pixel 8 phones to emerge at some point this year. I still would have expected the Pixel 7a to sit below that Pixel 7, not above it, in camera terms. Now, cameras are more than just the sum of their megapixels, of course. But what I've found in my testing of the Pixel 7a is that for its market segment, for that mid-range, just everyday shooter segment, this is a really, really good phone. You do, of course, get all of Google's AI phone camera trickery. So you can, for example, use Magic Eraser to try and get rid of unwanted elements, or Photo Unblur to fix focal problems. Now, are these photo innovations perfect? No, not always, and sometimes you have to do a little bit of tweaking to get them to work nicely. Look, I'll give you an example here. It's a slightly silly one, but I had fun with it. I took a photo of 2 abandoned shopping trolleys with the Pixel 7a, and then I decided, well, actually, I only really want one shopping trolley. Can Magic Eraser get rid of it? Well, let's take a look. Here's the original shot, and then here's the Magic Eraser version. It's not bad. There are still a few little artifacts. There's still a few things that need cleaning up. If you look closely enough, you can work out what it's done and how it's done it. But for the everyday consumer, that works quite well. The reality here is Magic Eraser clearly has been trained on people. It's a lot better at generally removing people than inanimate objects, but it can work. And again, this is not Photoshop level editing. This is everyday people wanting simple adjustments to their photos. It does that quite well. Any camera though, at above $200 or so, can typically take nice daytime shots. So I wanted to really see how this did in lower light situations. So what I did was I grabbed the Pixel 7a along with the Pixel 7 Pro, the iPhone 14 Pro, and the Samsung Galaxy A54. Why those phones? Well, the 7 Pro because it's a step up from the 7a, of course. the iPhone 14 Pro because it's a much more expensive phone to give me that kind of high watermark, and the Galaxy A54 because it's actually in very much the price range that the Pixel 7a sits in. And I went out and took a bunch of low light shots to get an idea of how well this handles light. The reality here, and I'll run through these things fairly quickly, is that the Pixel 7a shoots quite well. Definitely above what the A54 can handle, nearly as well as the 7 Pro, which is impressive in itself, not quite as good as the 14 Pro. And look, I'm not pretending that this is meant to be an advertisement for the iPhone 14 Pro. The reality here is that the cheapest iPhone 14 Pro is $1,000 more than this phone. And what that says is this phone is doing really well, punching massively above its weight when it comes to low light photography. The one thing you don't get with the Pixel 7a though is any kind of telephoto lens, any kind of true optical zoom lens. There's none of that built into this. You do get Google's Super Res Zoom though, which is just a kind of digital cropping with a bit of AI smoothing on top. And the thing there is that also works fairly well. So I'll give you an example here. The ultra-wide shot of Sydney's fairly famous Centrepoint Tower. It looks pretty decent in the ultra-wide. It's slightly nicer actually in the wide lens, but you'd expect that because it's actually a slightly better sensor. And even at 2 times zoom, it's not optical zoom of course, it's Super Res Zoom, it's still holding together pretty well. Now you can only push that zoom up to 8 times, and the end results of that, yeah, that's actually not that bad. It's not great. There's definitely some issues there and you couldn't use that shot for everything. But for a lot of people's everyday uses, yeah, that's fine. It's very demonstrative of what it is. And 8 times is probably about as far as you want to push it in real world use. Overall, look, this is not a pro level camera phone. And if you want that, and if you want that in Google, the 7 Pro is currently your best bet. I'd probably hold out till the 8 Pro if I were you at this point in the year. But the 7 Pro is where it's at, or obviously the iPhone if you want to go down that route. Still, the 7a shoots way better than most of the phones in this price range. And look, even just for that, it deserves some recommendation. But we haven't got to the processor yet. So in processor terms, Google made its play a couple of years ago to focus on its own silicon designs with its Tensor processors. And look, Google doesn't build them itself, it just designs them, but it does hype up the Tensor G2, which is what runs the Pixel 7a. And look, what's interesting here isn't so much its comparative benchmark speeds, it's the fact that it's the same Tensor G2 and the same quantity of RAM that you find in the Pixel 7. Again, going back to the Pixel 6a, that had less RAM than its companion phone in the higher spec. This has the same, so the performance is the same. And what that means is you're getting actual flagship performance in a much less than $1,000 phone, and that's genuinely exceptional at this price point. This thing just flies through most tasks. If you want it as a gaming phone, yeah, it works really well with that. The 90Hz screen can really work well with most Android apps, and where it doesn't, where it causes them to effectively overclock, you can always switch it off, just go back to 60Hz, and things are all good again. This is just a joyous phone to use. It's really nice. And look, yes, I have a definite preference towards clean Android UI, and this, of course, has a clean Android UI because it's coming from Google. But you can do what you like with launchers because it's Android. It's nicely configurable as well. It's also a 5G phone. Now, unfortunately, it's only sub 6 GHz here in Australia, but that is the way of basically every phone, but oddly enough, the Pixel 7 Pro. I think we're probably a year or two away before we really start to see millimeter wave phones, and I wouldn't really have expected to see it here. What about battery life though? Because that 90Hz screen, that's got to hurt the battery, doesn't it? Well, I did have some concerns with that, so I tested it out and I've been using it just as my day-to-day phone for most of the things I've done during my review period, and it's run really, really well. But to give it a comparative space, I ran my standard YouTube test, so 100% battery, full brightness, moderate volume, and I wanted to see how much battery life it lost. Now, my benchmark here is that anything that drops below 90%, that's going to struggle to see out a day. Every percentage point above 90% is good, and in fact, better and better and better. And to give that some perspective, the Pixel 6a actually did really well in this test. It got 97%. So the Pixel 7a has a better processor and a faster screen. How well do you think it did? It did exactly the same as the 6a, 97%. A really, really top-notch score. And in fact, basically the best in this class. Again, it's also better than I got in the same test with the Pixel 7. There's even good news on the charging front. Now, look, you don't get a charger in the box, and I know opinions are split on that one. You do get USB-C charging though, but you also get wireless charging. And wireless charging at this price point isn't totally unheard of, but it's pretty rare. So, is the Pixel 7a an actual flagship phone? No. Look, if you want flagships from Google, right now that's the Pixel 7 Pro. But again, I would strongly suggest wait out the couple of months until the Pixel 8 Pro comes to market. I mean, I would say the Pixel Fold there, but that's not coming down under. I mean, or at least it's officially not coming down under at launch. I'm reading that to mean we're probably not officially seeing it here at all. But within its own lane, in that $749 price point, the Pixel 7a is an excellent value device. I'd actually say arguably it's the best value phone you can buy right now, hands down. Highly, highly recommended. Anyway, that's my take on the Pixel 7a. What do you think? What do you want to know? Is there anything you'd like me to test or expand upon? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. There's a little bonus waiting for you for lasting this long. But before I go, don't forget to hit like and subscribe.